Hi and welcome to today's health conversation where the topic will be the importance between omega-6 and omega-3 and obesity and how these fatty acids affect obesity. And we know that it was in 2016 globally, actually it was estimated that 2/5 of all adults were overweight or obese at that time. And that's quite a large number.
Yeah, and it's actually, this was in 2016, and the latest numbers, or the recent data, are slightly higher, so it's 43%. So
that's quite a lot when you think about globally, and it varies between different countries, of course, but this is mentioned as global. So when we talk about overweight, it's referred to a BMI values from 25, which is quite low and quite normal.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm a 25, but from up to 30 and above. So if you are 30 and above, the BMI is classified as obese.
Obese, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you can take me as an example because I'm actually 25.
Yeah, me too.
So if you have more muscles, that can have an impact. Not saying I have.
But we will then focus on like overweight and obesity here. So, but there are several reasons why people can have overweight and be obese, and that is, of course, activity levels can affect, and what kind of food you eat.
Most definitely, yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's calories might not only a calorie. It's the way you get the calories also from the different food. So that will have impact. So yeah, if you take protein as an example, the body will use more energy to digest protein, as an example.
And also it can be genetics and use of medicines, etc., etc. So there are many reasons for overweight. But what we will focus on today is, of course, fats and omega-6 and omega-3s, and also chronic inflammation.
And why that has such a huge impact. And maybe be the number one reason for the obesity trend.
Yep.
That's what I really believe. So.
Because there has been large changes in our fat intake during. Imagine when we people got to be people back in the days when we were hunters and gatherers. We had a very low kind of fat intake. It was lots of activity, etc. We had to hunt for our foods, etc. And the omega-6 omega-3 balance were estimated to be around 1:1.
Yeah.
But when we approached the Industrial Revolution, we increased a lot of fats and different types of fats into our foods, into our diets. So we can see the trends that total fats increase a lot, saturated fats increase a lot since the 1900s, and also the omega-6 increased, while at the same time the omega-3 decreased.
Yeah.
Which is very, very sad.
Yeah.
So, but we also see in the next there that obesity also increased at the same time as the total fat, the saturated fat, and the omega-6 fats increased. So people, it could be a really correlating trend here, and you really see it in this.
Yeah, maybe many of you have seen this slide before, but it actually shows. So I used to say the problem started 115 years ago when we were able to make oil from seeds. And then I'm not talking about the cold pressed seed oils. This is the one that you are producing in a chemical way and with very high heat. So then these oils are also very, very dense in omega-6.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're incorporated into all food that we eat today, almost. You can find some sort of plant seed in everything that's given to animal feed. So when we eat meat, we get that into our bodies. All processed food.
Yep.
So everywhere you find some sort of omega-6
Yeah, we have this good example with the farmed salmon industry in Norway. So of course in the pellets the fish eat, they have the omega-6 fat and the grains. And typically the balance in the farmed salmon fish from Norway has about 70% omega-6 and only 30% omega-3.
It's very sad.
Yeah.
There's no fish left, it's just artificial. So,
yeah.
So this is very sad. But we also know when it comes to omega-6 and omega-3 that they have different effects on the fat cells in our body actually. That omega-6 fatty acids, they can actually create fat cells, they call it adipocytes. So they can create these fat cells and also make them quite large.
Yep.
And then it makes it easier for them also to be fill up with fat. So omega-6 can create like lots of fat cells, so becomes more fat in the body, like visceral fat in a way. And it's also very difficult to lose the fat again when you have a lot of omega-6 in your body. But the thing is, the omega-3 does the opposite. It doesn't create these mature adipocytes, these large ones, and it also makes it easier for the fat to be transported out from the cells. So both of these fatty acids also have a different effect on the fat cells themselves.
Yeah, I think we should mention then, Linda, that omega-6 and omega-3 are called essential fatty acids. So omega-6 are not always negative.
It is not.
It's just the too many of them that are the problem.
Absolutely.
And when you have too many of them, you are actually having an inflammatory diet. Omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. So
it's all about this balance that we talk about, the ratio.
Yeah.
So
now we're talking about why do we get so many of them?
Yeah.
So even like you said, the animals we are eating, they are also containing now more omega-6. So it's not only the oils and the hydrogenated fatty acid you find in the paper boxes, in the food you can eat in 5 years. It's also the animals we eat.
Yeah, it's everywhere, kind of. And again, then also we talk about inflammation and chronic inflammation.
Yeah, and maybe this can be discussed, of course, but scientists are pointing to that too many of the omega-6 are the #1 reason, the main reason for chronic inflammation. So we need to have a better balance, to have better cell membrane fluidity.
Absolutely. So we need to have this in mind. And also, it's now, in many studies, it's stated that omega-6 and omega-3 ratio, when you have a low omega-3 value and high omega-6 value, it is also then linked to chronic inflammation, which again is then linked to obesity. So in science also, it has this link between chronic inflammation and obesity, which of course seems really reasonable when you look into it.
100%. And here you see, if you measure your index, the index should be, this is the index? No, this is the ratio. Sorry, this is the ratio. So here you see if you have 5 times more omega-6, you are starting to get some kind of problems. You are in an inflammatory state.
Yeah. So your diet will be sort of inflammatory, and also, of course, inside your body, because our values reflects what's inside your body.
Yeah.
So we do not want to be in the yellow or red area. Preferably, we want to go to green, because in the red one creates problems in terms of like inflammation, which again can lead to obesity, insulin resistance, etc., etc.
So we are talking about long-term issues. So you might not see them tomorrow, but maybe with some time you have high risk of getting these problems. So we can go to the next slide, and here you see other reasons for inflammation, and all of them are triggering inflammation. And then you see #1, we already mentioned, that's the chronic inflammation itself, #1 reason, too many of the omega-6. But you see here #3, and that's what we are going also to talk a little bit more about, that sugar and insulin resistance.
Yes. And we call this like inflammaging as well. When you have too much inflammation in your body, it affects many things like sugar, like insulins as well, but of also aging of the body. And there's so many effects of inflammation.
All of these 8 inflammation triggers are actually accelerating the aging process in our body. And that's maybe the reason why some people look younger than the age, because they are controlling these things, and why some maybe look older than the age. And we call it the biological age, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And we have there are many effects, like we mentioned, of the chronic inflammation in your body, like insulin resistance, increased fat storage will be like following each other. If you have chronic inflammation, then the insulin, and then increasing the fat storage, which we will come back to. Weight gain, risk of diabetes type 2. We have metabolic syndrome, different types, heart disease, and like we mentioned, increased accelerated aging.
Yeah. So what is insulin resistance? First I want to say that maybe for me insulin is the number one, it's a fat storing hormone. So it's there to help us to take away high glucose or sugar. So then you get insulin. So it takes away the high blood sugar and then it's stored as fat. But if you have this activity ongoing all the time on a very high rate, then you can get insulin resistance. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, and also then if you have this high level, let's just say, it can also then start to create body fat because your body is in saving mode in a way. It doesn't burn the fat, but it starts to then work with the insulin instead.
Yeah,
So
when you have high blood sugar, you cannot burn fat. It's not possible. So to burn fat, you need to get rid of glucose in the blood, or being, many say starving. I like to just say empty. You're empty. So when you're empty, that could be a good thing because then you are burning fat as energy.
Yeah.
So because then you have no insulin.
No.
And no glucose available.
So with this high insulin, the body prioritizes difference. It's not the fat that's been prioritized.
Yeah.
So, and what causes high insulin? You know, typical too much sugar, frequent snacking. It mentioned, of course, then the processed foods.
Yeah, the frequent snacking. Linda, I want to talk about that because I can see people eat, I eat 4 or 5 times a day. Maybe that's not the best thing, maybe. That can be another topic. But the more you eat, more often you eat, then you get insulin. So when you have insulin coming too often and in a big way, then that's maybe the big reason for insulin resistance. So you need to let the body rest from time.
Absolutely.
But frequent snacking is typically what we're talking about also is when you eat the wrong food, the wrong snack. So
it becomes like this vicious cycle. You want to snack when high insulin levels are high because then you get these dips all the time, etc., etc. So all of this becomes like a vicious cycle, unfortunately.
Snacking, like if you are hungry and you take a Snickers bar, it's maybe not a good option. So the apple, still sugar, but you have the fiber, so it offset the sugar. And that's maybe a very good choice then.
Absolutely.
Instead of the Snickers bar.
And also, of course, activity levels can affect insulin.
Yeah. Well, can we just go back? Because processed food, highly processed food, because now it's many people are wearing this glucose monitor. And then we can see from the glucose monitors that, highly processed food or ultra-processed food can even have a higher spike of glucose than sugar itself.
Okay, that's interesting.
So, and it's the ultra-processed way we make the food is actually spiking insulin, sometimes even more than sugar. So we need to be aware of that.
Yeah, that's very good information. I didn't even know that. So very, very nice. And also, we should be careful with ultra-processed food, as people say as well, because they contain all of these different fatty acids that are omega-6 basically. And we also
trans
see,
fats.
Trans fat as well. And we also see in this graph that while the omega-6 fatty acids or the seed oils increased in intake, what also increased at the same time? Yeah, diabetes and
type 2 diabetes is going kind of parallel with the consumption of the omega-6 oils.
Yeah.
And it's a paradox, I will say, that type 2 diabetes was mainly became a problem in the around 1940, 1938, 1940. Then we saw a trend in more type 2 diabetes. And we can even say it was discovered in 1938, kind of as a problem.
Like when the Industrial Revolution, when we started with the processed food and the increase of inclusion of omega-6, low omega-3s. So it's all a trend there, unfortunately. It's a sad trend, but that's just how it is. But how can we use the omega-3 as a prevention for this? We know that in studies showing that EPA and DHA can actually be a good prevention for diabetes type 2 by improving the insulin signaling and also influence glucose metabolism. And of course also the chronic inflammation. And we know that diabetes types 2 affect approximately 90% of the people with diabetes worldwide. And that's quite large and quite serious in a way. And also that diabetes will affect around 783 million people by the year of 2045. If we don't do something about it, we, all of us in ecology, we can do our job in promoting omega-3, of course, but let's cross fingers that the health governments also will stop.
Yes, an epidemic, and it's connected to also Alzheimer's disease. We even call Alzheimer's. Scientists call it type 3 diabetes, so it's connected. So we need to be better.
Yeah, so we can start eating better foods and do better, of course. And since a lot of the studies out there are done on men when it comes to health and disease, we want to also tell about women's studies that's been done on obesity and overweight. There was a study in Australia, 300 young healthy women, where there were two groups, where one group were like normal weight and the other one was obese. And what they did is that they saw that the ladies that had overweight and obese had lower omega-3 levels in their body and then of course in their food. So again, that sort of explains, a way of inflammation, insulin resistance and these things that can of course then be associated with low omega-3 levels and high omega-6. And also it's been said in many studies that young women actually eat too little omega-3 in their diets. And also that 10% only of childbearing women in that age, that they consume too low levels of DHA. And that's very sad.
It's very interesting, this one, because if you look at infant mortality rate, so when your first year, or maybe within the first year, then you see a really good connection to the countries that consume more omega-3. So you have Japan, Iceland, Norway are on top, in the right top, in infant mortality rate. So they are the lowest. Yeah. And we know it's connected to what you're saying, because when you are pregnant, all the omega-3 go to the brain of the baby.
All of it. And it depletes the brain of the woman itself, so they don't have anything. So it's so important for young people, or young women especially, to take more omega-3s. And also you see when it comes to weight gain, actually it says in studies that it's easier for young women to gain weight in terms of instead of than older women. I didn't know that. I thought maybe it was different, but actually that's what they say. So it's a vulnerable group, the young women, for low omega-3 levels. And another study that was done as well, just to show more information about this, a group that took quite high levels of omega-3, 4.8 gram of omega-3 for 3 months, a group of normal weight and overweight women, where they also looked into inflammation markers. And what they saw when they took higher levels of omega-3 in their diet for 3 months, that it of course influenced inflammation in a positive way, and also their metabolism. And in this study, it's also mentioned that omega-3 should be used as a therapy for overweight and obesity. And that's a nice thing to include into a scientific study, I think.
This one is a study with men?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
this is where the women also had obesity and normal weights as well, and they took
40 men in this group, 25 to 50 years old, and they had 1.8 gram of omega-3. And the study just showed that when you got this amount of omega-3, EPA, DHA, actually your fat percentage went down, and particularly around the waist
area, which is the important area for can also be the dangerous fat puts around this area, and that's where you also gain weight.
Yeah, so the body fat percent and the visceral fat, which is, you said is so important. So absolutely. A very strong study on that.
Yeah, and the inflammation markers again went down when increasing the omega-3 intake.
Yeah, and that might be the very reason for why it went down so much, because inflammatory markers, when they go down, your insulin sensitivity goes up.
Yeah, so that's also like this spiral, everything connects together. So yes, absolutely.
And this one is quite interesting. There's a new, not a new study, but there is a study that actually proved that omega-3 help you to build more muscles when you're training. If you eat protein or the right amino acids. So this is a study, and it was published in the Journal of Clinical Science. It was only 9 adults, sedentary lifestyle, but it showed when you had 4 grams, quite a lot.
That's quite
of course,
a lot.
Quite a lot of omega-3 per day for 8 weeks. And then they found that it activates mTOR. mTOR is the switch for synthesizing protein.
Okay.
So you can actually utilize protein more to build muscles. So mTOR went up with the omega-3. And also the key here was reduction, as we already talked about, reduction of inflammation. So it actually improves the muscle cell sensitivity to the amino acids. So it can pick up the protein even better. So why is it important? Well, it's important because if you have more omega-3 and you train and have protein, you get more lean muscles, you get more muscles. When you get more muscles, you burn more calories, and then you get even leaner. So very interesting.
Many benefits of omega-3 fatty acids in here.
So we can actually conclude with this study that omega-3 makes protein more effective.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
That's very good to know. And also there's many ways of lowering inflammation. Like we said, increase your omega-3 intake daily. You can do it safe and efficient with our product that has the polyphenols from the extra virgin olive oil. Get the vitamin D in there. Eating more of the greens, you know, spices is inflammatory.
Yeah.
Exercise, training.
For sure. One thing about exercise is that when you exercise, even if you are insulin resistant, there is a backdoor to utilize sugar in the blood, so you don't need insulin. So we can say it's a backdoor to taking out sugar without insulin. So exercise even improve insulin resistance. So that's one way. So it's not only diet. Exercise can also be very helpful.
Very good combination then. And sleeping, quality of sleeping is very important, and managing stress. And of course, reducing sugar and processed foods. So there are many things that you can do for yourself, for your body, and also recommend to others when it comes to these problems with fats and obesity and et cetera, and live a healthy and active lifestyle. That's the most important.
And I want to say I'm not perfect, and I crave, everyone that knows me, they know I like cakes and chocolate.
Me too. Guilty as charged.
But I usually eat my chocolate after I have been exercise, because then I know the body can take care of it in a better way.
Yeah.
So there is always possibilities to have some bad food.
Yes, and enjoy and live life as well. So
and take your omega-3.
Yeah.